All right, hello everyone. My name is Lance Smith. I am a resident of San Francisco, and we are here at the Democracy Convention in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm very honored to have with me John Brakey, who is an election integrity activist, transparency activist.
Yes, I resigned from the integrity.
Transparency activist with the organization Audit-AZ. And to the right of him is
Bill
Reisner, his election attorney. And I am very honored to be interviewing both of them. I was originally placed into contact with John by Debbie Lusignan from the Sane Progressive, and she got me really interested in protecting the vote, election integrity, activism and issues, and I got to speak with John a few months ago when I was helping out with a congressional campaign in District 34, Los Angeles, and I had a lot of questions about his work and what people and campaigns can do to protect the vote and to possibly audit the vote after an election takes place. So, John, would you just give a little bit of an overview of your organization and some of the history of your work in this area?
I'd be glad to. You know, I've been doing this for 13 years with this guy, my lawyer, and he's really been my mentor, who's really helped me get down the rabbit hole of election fraud and what it's all about. And first off, I want to explain something. Yes, I used to be an election integrity activist. But I realize the system really has very little integrity. And what it's really about now for me is transparency, get to the solution. And that was what we have discovered is a way to go ahead and get at what we need is elections that are transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. And when I say that, it sounds like, maybe cheap words or whatever, but let me explain, is that when we talk about transparency, that's part of the solution. We need to be able to have elections that are transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. And one of the things that me and Bill and have discovered during our work in elections is that to make that transparency, that at this point in time right now, I'm happy to report that 40% of the machines in the United States that are counting votes on hard copy paper ballots have ballot images. And these images are an exact copy of the ballot. Now, ballots are very, very hard to get at because they're unique. And they're afraid of what they call election chicanery. They're afraid, the excuse is that you might make a mark on the ballot, have a piece of lead below your finger, and you might make an overvote. And in order to go ahead and to check an election, first off, I call it a catch-22 situation. And Bill, you're probably the better guy to explain the problem with elections, and having an election attorney is that catch-22 when it's very hard to verify election because you cannot get the proof.
Well, I assume that's the case in a lot of states. Arizona, absolutely, to contest an election, you have to allege specifically what was wrong and that the outcome would have been different. And we have to do that within 5 days of the canvass. But when you're dealing with a computer, you can't know, you can't get that information. If the numbers were changed or stuff that happened in the inside of the computer, you won't know. And I suspect a lot of states have, if not those time periods, a similar requirement. And there's essentially no way that you can challenge an election that has been altered based on programming or something with the computer. It's the kind of thing that you could have done in the old days if you know that somebody was buying votes and they bought 260 votes, and if you know that some other thing happened and specifically, and then you can claim that the outcome would have been different. Computers, bad chance, there are too many ways to work the numbers, and you can never prove. And it's pretty general in the whole country that it's extremely difficult after an election to prove or change anything. The whole system lines up against that.
Right, and I mean, one example of how difficult it is to audit elections, a friend of mine in the local San Francisco Green Party ran for a seat on the Board of Supervisors a couple of years ago. He ran as a write-in candidate, and he found a lot of discrepancies in the vote. The elections department was not willing to try to explain that vote, and they wanted to charge $80,000 for a recount. And this is for a seat on essentially what's normally called a city council in San Francisco City and County. It's called the Board of Supervisors. So even if you just want to be able to verify that something didn't take place the correct way, the cost is just the cost alone in many jurisdictions is just too prohibitive for anyone to even dream of trying to pay. I want to just focus a little bit on your work in the, I believe that you filed suit after the Democratic national primary last year, in the Bernie Sanders versus Hillary Clinton primary. Could you provide a couple of examples that show that election fraud or malfeasance occurred in your county or in your state?
Well, in our whole state. And you know, it's an interesting situation is that it was a very hard suit to file, but we had to do it. I knew that my chances of winning were very nil because I got a great lawyer, and we know how the system works. But it was so outrageous what they did that we had lines in Maricopa that, well, put it this way, we could prove that 150,000 people were suppressed. That's one. The second thing we could prove, that the election results were contrary. Bernie Sanders wins the precinct vote by 59%. Hillary Clinton wins the vote by mail by 60%. And then the provisionals come in and Bernie wins them by 63%. Now, which of the three pollsters are you going to believe? Listen, you know, when you have voting, there's such a rule called the rule of large numbers. And you know, when you look at numbers, I used to complain years ago and say, hey, Bill, look at this result. There's a 6 or 7% difference. This is a 39 to 40% difference.
And Bob Fetrakis
wrote an article on it.
Speaks a lot about that this is well outside the margin of error, that our State Department would not certify an election result in a foreign country if it's beyond, what, like 2 or 3%?
I would say that, you know, 4 or 5, 6%, you know, it's on the edge. But 39% is outrageous. But by the way, it happened in California too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It was bizarre. After I did Arizona, I was asked to go ahead and I monitor the California election and do what I do because, you know, I've been doing this 13 years for basically full time. And you build a rear view mirror, you get a feel, and after you study this thing and you work all over on different elections, I mean, Massachusetts is a bizarre story, but California had to be the keeper. What happened in California and what we discovered, and in a recently released document that we released today. And, California, what I called was a hack. It was at the front end, a stack. It was a strip and a flip. You only audit the first 65% of your vote. You actually sort it out, you put it in piles, and it's auditable. And on election night, Hillary Clinton won the vote by mail by 26%. And I want you to know, when I saw that, I didn't realize what was going on. I said, oh my God, this is awful. It's over for Bernie. I'm very disappointed. And so I opened a bottle of wine, I cooked dinner, went to sleep. The next morning I woke up, she was only leading by 13. And I knew only 65% of the vote was in. So then I go back and I start canvassing, just feverishly for days. And I'm pulling every county member in. And I go, oh my God. So then I started studying and I figured out, how did they do this? They used the Arizona method, okay? And it's in the vote by mail. And over in California, in Maricopa County, we have what they call Pitney Bow machines. And these Pitney Bow machines are sorters. And as the vote, they use it to get the vote out and they bring the vote in. And as the vote comes in, they sort it. And I had this video this lady in San Diego. And she said, you know, our machines are so smart that if you call in and you say, hey, I never got my vote by mail, we know instantly, and the Pitney Bow knows if that envelope comes in, the first one we sent you, that we'll put it in a special bin. And I'm going, oh my God, it's hooked up live to the database. And so that database can be set up that they know. Listen, you know, in 2006, and, you know, me and Bill, we couldn't believe this when we found the article by the LA Times. Remember that? Does the GOP know if you don't like anchovies? And that's because of the Help America Vote Act. A lot of people don't know they spent $3.9 billion, but only half of that went for the machines. The other half went into a super intelligent voter database that no longer is just run by a county, it's run at a state level. And those states have matching points. That's what the Help America Vote did. And it was a way of profiling us. And they knew. Now we are 11 years later. You got Google, you got Facebook, and by the way, they had a backdoor in the Bertie database.
Yes.
And they know how people were donating money, or you advertise it on your Facebook. So they know how you're going to vote.
Right.
Now, this is the oldest trick in our country, voter suppression. That's what our country has always been about. Wouldn't you say, Bill? I mean, you know, it's a story you
Yeah, I
told
would
today.
say they started off suppressing women, blacks, Indians.
You know, it's so bad when we found out fraction magic out of Memphis, Tennessee. This is a bizarre story I'm going to tell you. But there was, these black people always voted for white prosecutors. And this guy, Benny Smith and Bev Harris, dug into it really deep. And they found out that a black voter counted as 3/5 of a voter. That's how they had it programmed. And that's why the white prosecutor always got elected, because it was a minority of white people. It's like gerrymandering, you know. I mean, it's the same kind of system. I mean, it's the way they think. And it's a horrifying thought to know that we are fighting the same battles. I guess we fought hundreds of years ago, huh, Bill? Your ancestors, mine too.
Yeah, unless mine were helping rig it.
So, I mean, 3/5 of a vote, that's what...
Slavery.
That's what African Americans were considered as slaves, were only considered 3/5 of a person. So it's
Right.
very, very strange that they... I guess it's fitting that they chose that number. So by fraction magic, are you saying that they're not counting every single vote as one entire vote?
Yes. Yeah, you have to have a fractionalized based
Yeah,
system to make it balance.
It's 100, 100. It's like broke up like pennies.
Okay.
And you need to, if you, let's say you had 999 people vote. And you know, when you analyze elections, you have, here is your votes, and here's your recorder's office, and they record how many people voted, and you want to match them up. It's a check and balance, okay?
Right.
And so what are you going to do with that? If you haven't got a fraction, what are you going to do with that vote over and under? If you said, okay, we're going to set this election up, we're going to win by 51, and they're going to lose by 49, okay? Well, you would have that oddball, and you have to do it on a precinct level. You don't rig on a state level or a county. It's by precinct, because precincts have history. And you know that this precinct we can steal 3 or 4%, this one we can do 6. It has to be broken down on a precinct level, and that's how the virus works, if you want to call it a virus, or an app. They call it different things. But it's a severe problem, and it happens in a lot of states that do not have good audits. Now, it's not in every state. They steal with impunity because they know in the system where the impunity they can have. In our state, it's in the vote by mail. They got a bizarre way of checking the vote by mail. They do a random sample of 200 ballots. And those 200 ballots could be from, if you're in Maricopa County, 1,000 precincts. So when you get that 200 votes, and it all adds up really white, just like Volkswagen had their system set up,
Right.
okay? I mean, if everybody knows about Volkswagen, they sold 600,000 cars in the United States, and it passed emissions basically 600,000 times because the system was rigged. A logic and accuracy test is done before an election and after an election. And we know, because we have a guy in our crew who used to be an NSA agent. He would always say, listen, I used to do this for NSA. I know how the system works. And I used to teach programming. And basically, it tells me that a logic and accuracy test can be set up to count right at this point. But when it goes into actual mode, it can change. And that may be happening in a lot of places.
I think, I may be wrong
Please.
on this in my understanding of the fraction magic, but you don't need, I think, to predetermine what percent certain votes might be. Maybe you could do that. But one of the problems is you don't know how many people are actually going to show up and vote in the precinct.
Exactly.
But you might predetermine that you want your person to win by 56% and the other person to have a certain percent. You can do that before. And then on real time, you can make the votes come out, those percentages. So if you look at a situation like, let's say, in Ohio, when Bush won and Blackwell hired a company in Chattanooga, and each county or whatever those units were in Ohio would send votes to the Secretary of State, but they didn't go to him. By contract, it went to Chattanooga. Then he sends it to Secretary of State, and in real time there, that person can make changes to the votes the way he wants to come out to a certain percentage, and make the changes in the computers that send it into him.
Right.
All through that programming system, that man-in-the-middle kind of thing, utilizing fraction magic, all the stuff they could do. I guess the reason they call it fraction magic is because, wow, you could do that? That's magical, you know.
And I've run fraction magic, and it's a freaky thing to run.
So one thing that concerns me is that a couple weeks ago I visited a political group local in San Francisco, and then I said, well, you know, it's great that you have all these policies that you want to pass. What about election fraud? What about recent experiences that have been documented, videotaped, photographed evidence? And we vote on machines in several parts of the country that have been proven to be remotely hackable without, and flipping votes without any, leaving any trace of evidence. And they just kind of looked at me like I was an 8-headed Martian and said that, oh, well, that's really kind of conspiracy, and there's really no evidence for that. What is one thing that you can cite to say to someone who doesn't believe that this is a real problem?
That they must believe in the American dream, and to believe in the American dream, you gotta be asleep. Okay? And it's time to wake up. This is 2017. Every day on TV, they talk about the Russians hacking. They talk about the problems on elections. And you know, it's not 10 years ago when 13 years ago when we first started. Is that, I'm sorry, I'm a conspiracy factionalist and I deal in facts. And I was in Las Vegas last weekend. And you know how emboldened I felt when I left? To watch people come through this room and hack the machines with their phones or different things, to watch the scientists stand up, and you can see all the videos on my site, and to see them stand up and now know that it's true.
Imagine you felt pretty vindicated
Yes,
at that
yeah,
point.
I felt very much that way.
I would say another thing, which is they're absolutely blind and dead to actual American history.
Yes, that's true too.
From our first elections, when Thomas Jefferson's vote was on, people started cheating. They cheated for decade after decade. I think I was reading about Abraham Lincoln stuffing the convention, rigging it fraudulently so he could be the nominee of the party when he was elected. Just election after election in our history, people have always cheated.
Why would we expect it to be any different in 2017?
Totally. The only thing
throughout
different
history?
now is that the cheating is all in a little
Black
box,
Little devices.
and all the other stuff is theater. You can go and they'll have, look how careful we are on these ballots. This is our system here. And then they have individuals who volunteer their work. that are truly good citizens who do good jobs on what they're doing. Everything is shown. Look how careful what are we got everything. Did you go through the metal detector? We check your pockets? No, all that stuff. And there's a black box somewhere that's programmed with instructions, and it does it the way it's instructed. That's, oh, but you can't look at that because
Proprietary
secrecy of the
software.
ballot
Yeah, secret, right.
and companies own. We privatized it, it's proprietary, so there's no way. And then, like in our state, there's no way anybody could look at it, including the Secretary of State, because they don't have a copy.
That's right.
That's just
It's incredible. We're stupid.
Separately, I just wanted to mention a topic. Early on, there was some question where you had said something about how the Secretary of State for foreign countries doesn't agree the election was good for a certain percentage.
They won't recognize the election in another nation if it's
Yeah,
beyond
the United
a
States
certain-
government.
Yeah, what I think that relates to is exit polling. Exit polling has been developed to where it's within, I'm told, 1% kind of accuracy.
Right.
And what I've heard is if the exit polling and the end results are more than like 2% or whatever the number is, that's what they won't approve.
You're correct.
And
that's what I was thinking of.
the interesting thing about looking at that is in this country, I believe a couple things are happening. One is the news media that are controlled by our rulers as well aren't doing exit polling and don't report those results. And to the extent that there is exit polling, when they match it with other things, there's a little red shift where they make changes to make it come out and right.
Yeah, because
So-
their goal is to make everything look pretty and presentable and not have any.
And that's where Jonathan
discrepancies.
Simon,
Right.
in his book,
That's
Red
all.
Shift, who's a very good friend, Jonathan Simon has been studying this phenomenon, and statistically he has proven it. And he's the one who downloaded in 2004 and found that the Edison people changed it. And, and it was just a year or two ago, I know that I was working with Lori Grace, Bob Petrakis, and others, that we said we were going to sue California because we wanted those exit polls. And what did they do? They canceled them.
They can't. Yeah, they said we'll stop doing exit
That's
polls.
right.
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
something?
Because they're not matching, the ones that we've done so far aren't matching the.
Well, they said they were, but we're gonna stop doing it because they're gonna sue us to get it.
Right.
Because it was our right.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the
exactly.
system.
Yeah, so sort of a tip-off.
Yeah. So as we wrap up, I would just want to thank you for being here. And could you tell everyone the name of your organization again and the website where they can
Okay.
locate you, where they can volunteer, where they can possibly donate, contribute otherwise?
I would appreciate that. We have a site called Election Nightmares, because it is a nightmare.
It is.
But we are Audit-AZ, and audit is an acronym. It stands for Americans United for Democracy, Integrity, and Transparency, because that's what we need. And that's why I'm a transparency activist, because that's what we need is transparency. And that's the fight. And please join us. Please get into this fight. There's no need to believe in a black box. You might as well believe in Martians or whatever. And even though my acronym is ET, okay? Because I'm no longer an EI, so I'm an ET.
Right,
But it
right.
stands for transparency, okay? Not extraterrestrials or anything, okay?
Right.
I know my enemies, well, you'll probably use that against me, but that's okay. I love my enemies anyway, because I do this work with love. If you harbor bitterness, love will talk elsewhere. I get up in the morning and know that what I do is very, very important, and I have 6 grandkids. Bill has 2 finally, made him more committed,
Yeah.
Our seed is going forward. We may not, but that will. And thank you for working with us today.
Thank
It
you
was
so
a real
much.
pleasure, it really was, and thank you. You really did a great job.
Getting to meet you
Yeah.
and hear your presentation today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.